We're just under 2 weeks away from the midterm, so I'm going to do my 2022 Senate prediction just before we get there. Now, just before I start, I want to ask, please consider subscribing. I'm almost at 300 subscribers. I'm hoping to get to 500, if we're lucky anyway, before the midterms actually reach. So, if you are new, please consider subscribing, leaving a like on this video, and sharing this video with your friends and as many people you know possible. Anyways, getting into the video. As we can see here, we're going to be doing the Senate prediction. We're just a couple, not even a couple weeks out now. It's like 12 days, I believe. So we're getting very, very close. And polls have tightened quite a bit, like I was saying earlier in my governor prediction. My prediction, my claim that Republicans were going to gain, that the red wave would come back, that, oh, this polling trend that showed Democrats gaining for a while was going to reverse, and that Republicans would gain as we got closer, and at the end of the day, they would lead the RCP generic ballot. They would lead in most of the swing state polls, and again, I'm right, as we will see when we look at these. So, starting off, all of the safe states for the Republicans, all of the safe for the Democrats. We will fill all of them out. These are going to hopefully be no surprise to people because I've talked about them more than enough at this point, that people just shouldn't be surprised by which states are going to be safe and which ones are going to be not. Like, it's pretty simple. So this is pretty much the safe state map right now. This is what is currently completely safe. Pretty much very little competition. Illinois, I saw a poll that was like almost within 10 points, so maybe you could put in the likely column, but it's not going to flip, so it's not really important to bother talking about it. Oregon, California, they're not going to flip. Hawaii is definitely not going to flip. New York won't flip, unfortunately. And then Vermont, Connecticut, Maryland, not going to flip. And then the same goes for all of these states, other than some polls that have Utah potentially going independent. Not going to happen. It's just not going to. The state won't vote that way. It's like, I can understand that it'd be maybe closer. I mean, like, at best, I'd give it a likely, but seriously, it's probably going to be safe. And again, it won't actually affect the overall outcome of this election. So we'll start getting into some of these more important swing states. There were a few polls. There was a short period where Washington was pretty close. It was within a lean margin. I think at the end of the day, it'll be likely for the Democrats. I think they will hold that likely. I'd be impressed if Republicans picked it up. I think it's Tiffany Smiley running. She probably doesn't really have much of a chance, but the race is a lot closer than many would have expected. And honestly, it's a nice thing to see, even if it's still going to be held. It is nice to see that there has been at least some amount of a trend pushing the states slightly to the right, which, again, impressive, good to know. Now, moving on, we have Colorado as well. That one is Joe D. He's socially just a complete liberal anyway. Not my favorite candidate. He'd be better. He's better than the Democrat in the state. Barely. He's better than Bennett, but he can't win it. Or maybe he can, but I don't think he will. It would be, at best, a lean margin. Likely probably seems more realistic, but I could see it very well being lean. Probably no closer. And that, realistically, I think will be most of the Democrat states from this point forward. Now, we have Florida. That one's Rubio. Rubio is going to win it safe. Completely safe. Like, there's very few polls that even have it under 10 points. And again, Republicans generally do a bit better than what polling shows in Florida. So I do have Rubio winning that. Not my favorite candidate, but he's an okay senator. He'll win by probably 10 to 12 points, somewhere in that margin. And moving on, we have North Carolina. This one's a bit more interesting. North Carolina, that one's Ted Budd. It's North Carolina, the state more or less is kind of just stagnant Republican. I've talked about that in the past. But Ted Budd is leading in all of the polls. The state's not going to be overestimating Republicans. If anything, it'll probably underestimate by a couple points. And at the end of the day, I think honestly see North Carolina going just over 5 points, so just barely within the likely margin. Now, another interesting state to look at is Nevada. As we can see, this one's versus Laxalt and Cortez Masto. Laxalt's been leading since September 14th. So he's been ahead for quite a while, and he will keep that lead. I think at the end of the day, he's probably going to win by, I'd say, a bit more than 0.5. I do think he wins it and flips the seat. This is one of the most likely flips. Most pundits, even a lot of left-wing pollsters, have said this is the most likely flip for Republicans. I think he wins it by about 2 points, putting it just within the lean margin. And that'll be huge, on top of the fact that Joe Lombardo is set to likely beat Sisolak in the state. We also have Georgia, this one. Georgia, Herschel Walker, he's had some issues with his campaign, and despite that, he is now leading the polls, the polling average, by 0.6. So most of what they've done has not stuck. Good to know. Not surprised. Warnock was barely leading beforehand anyway, but at the end of the day, I'm not surprised Warnock's not a good candidate. He's a fake Christian, pretty much, supposedly pastor, but he's not going to win the state. I actually do still think Warnock loses. I think Walker wins. This one will be closer. I think this one could very well be within a tilt margin. It depends on how these polls, or how accurate these polls are going to be. 0.6, I'd say, is pretty close. I think he could win it by over a point, though, which would put it into the lean column. So I'm going to put it lean for now. I think it'll be like 1 to 1.5 at best. It's possible Republicans outperform my predictions way more than I thought they could. It depends on how accurate the polling has been recently. As we can see with this poll, it was a +5. The Rasmussen poll was +5 for Republicans, or for Walker in this case. So maybe these are just older polls and they're underestimating. As you can see, these are much more recent. So maybe the trends are just continuing. And since this is just the average between some older polls and newer, we're seeing that the spread being only 0.6, it could be higher. So again, it's very, very possible that we do actually see the state going by more than a point to a point and a half. It could very well go all the way to 2 or maybe even 3, which I'd say 3 is stretching it, but 2 does seem possible. Now, we also have Ohio. This one, I'm not even going to bother addressing anyone who actually thinks otherwise, but Ohio is going to be safe. These polls have been atrocious. They've been pretty far off most of the time, and I'd say they're going to be much further off. Polling just doesn't seem to be getting Ohio right. They haven't in the past. They predicted that Biden was going to win the state in 2020, and then that went in an almost safe margin for Trump. And then on top of that, we have Mike DeWine winning in the polls by like 20-something points. I just don't see that much of a vote split on the ballot. So realistically, I do put Ohio in a safe column, honestly. At most, likely, but realistically, I still think it will be safe. It'll probably be over 10 points, and long-term Ohio is easily a safe Republican stronghold. So that already gives Republicans 50. They need one more to take the Senate, and that's pretty easy. They're given 3 realistic options, and then 1 maybe option. But Wisconsin, that one pretty easy. I don't actually have any polls open, but Ron Johnson's going to win very easily. I'd say in a likely margin even. He's polled in the past. I've talked about it. He's polled in the past behind and then gone ahead and outperformed those polls by like 5 points, because Wisconsin just seems to be so inaccurately polled every single time. It's quite atrocious. And he was polling about 2 points behind in the 2016 election, and then won by, I think, about 3. Now, he's currently polling, I think, about 2 to 3 points ahead. So given that's the case, assuming he outperforms, he very well could win it by 8 to 10 points. I don't think it'll be 10, but at the least, I'd say it's going to be about 8-point victory for Ron Johnson. Now, we also have Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is an interesting state here. This one, the polls have tightened quite a bit from what they were earlier, when Fetterman had an 8-point lead, or almost 9-point, and now he's down to a 1.3-point lead. Now, Pennsylvania notoriously has not been an amazing state to poll. And Fetterman, especially if you saw the last debate, it was atrocious. Fetterman sounded like, he looked like, it seemed like Biden, but a stroke victim version of Biden, who was much larger and even more radical in policy. It was painfully bad, and Oz is not my favorite. I've talked about that in the past as well, but he is much more likely to win. And at the end of the day, as you can even see, RCP's projection has it as a hold. They have it also as a toss-up. But at the end of the day, I do see this one going in the Republican column by, I'd say, a lean margin. I think about a point, maybe two. It's pretty likely. I don't really see Fetterman winning. He has nothing going for him at all. And it could very well go by more. But for now, I'd say 1 to 2 points is a fairly realistic margin that I see Oz winning it by. On top of this, we also have the state of Arizona, the Senate race between Masters and Kelly. This one has also gotten much closer from where it was earlier, where there was a 6-point lead for Kelly. It is now down to a 1.5 margin lead. Now, something to talk about here. There is, to some extent, maybe going to be some splitting on the ballot, but I don't think this much because, again, most polls have the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, and the governorship going all for MAGA Republican candidates by 3 to 9 points, somewhere within that margin. And to say that Kelly's going to win it, being a completely fake moderate, he's horrible in policy, and he's just basically completely in line with Joe Biden when it comes to voting record, it just makes no sense that Masters would even be behind. I very well do think these polls have just been fairly inaccurate. And even RCP, they have it as a GOP pickup. They project that Masters will probably win it, despite a 1.5 lead for Kelly. So at the end of the day, I think this one would be close, but I think it'll be about a point. Again, point and a half for Blake Masters. An amazing candidate, by the way. Great on policy. A great man, very respectable, and overall I think he will help make the state just that much better. Plus overall he's going to help the country, giving us a larger majority in the Senate, which is something we very much need to prevent the Biden's administration from pushing any more crap over the next 2 years before Trump gets to run again and then take him out. Now lastly we have New Hampshire. This one I do think will probably actually stick in the Democrat column. I don't see Hassan losing to Bolduc, unfortunately. Bolduc, as I've mentioned, is just a little too interventionist at times. Like, I don't think he's the worst, and he's got some okay policy, but I don't think he can win it. And even RCP, they project it as a Dem hold. It probably will be, despite some closer polling. It's possible. I do think it's possible, but at the end of the day, I'd say probably lean New Hampshire, lean Democrat New Hampshire is more or less the most realistic outcome in the state. Probably a point to 2 points somewhere within there, maybe three, but like it won't be a likely state for Democrats. It's possible it could flip, it could get into a closer margin, but for now I'd say about a 1 to 3 points somewhere within there, Hassan will win it. And then at the end of the day, this is what the Senate map I think will look like. We're just a bit out. We'll see if these are accurate predictions. We have about 12 days. So as you can see, I project 53 Republican Senate seats, 47 Democrat, despite a lot of the pundits in the left and the pollsters saying, well, no, our projection has it differently. Democrats will hold. They'll get 50, Republicans get 50. Like, Georgia, that can't be one. Pennsylvania, nah. Arizona, no. But these ones, yeah, so it'll be 50-50. No. At the bare minimum, Republicans win at least one enough to take the Senate, no matter what. There'll be at least 51 Republican senators. Any of these 3 states, at least one of them will flip Republican, for sure. Well, hold Republican and then flip or flip. Anyways, that's all for now. If you enjoyed, please consider leaving a like on the video. Again, subscribe. I'm trying to get to 500 by the midterms. And comment. Let me know what you thought of the video. Do you agree with my prediction, or do you think Republicans could do worse, better? What do you think? Let me know. Anyways, that's all for now. Good night.